Hey babies, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about bearing down on reality from a place of God's love and support, okay? Because we all know that we can essentially shift the trajectory of where we're co-creating our life, but through different experiences, it may become diluted just how powerful we are at co-creating what that looks like. And so a lot of us are really connected to God, or learn here to connect to God from a place of a relational connection, right? Because as humans, we do get that experience where we bond by social experience. And so we see, our relationship with God through that lens. So when we are really and truly the most faithful and the most connected, it's because we see that relationship from a bond as how we would with family, friends, and, loved ones. Obviously, the relationship with God is timeless and unconditional, but it's still just kind of human nature, the way that we bridge the gap through relationships. And so this is something that when you are bending reality can be disconnected. And so the way that, I want us to perceive when we're bending reality, like I kind of mentioned in my past video, by way of knowing that God loves us and God has our back. Because in moments of distress or disconnection, you're not thinking so formulaic from the wisdom of how the universe works. But from a heart-centered place, you're going to remember God loves me and God has my back. And that essentially is going to be the premise for, this experience, which was created from love by God, and for us to understand who we are as creators. And so what that would look like is bending the reality with our will of knowing that the universe, God's creation, has to reflect back to us what it looks like for one of two outcomes, either the direct outcome that you want or a more transmuted version. Okay, we can't control everything in this universe, but we can steer the will and the direction and the momentum. And when we are in our most, premier sense of source embodiment, then we're attracting that positive outcome to us more quickly and more directly, because then we are in the energy of receiving without a doubt what it is the universe already wants to deliver to us by way of God specifically creating this experience, from the love of us. Okay. So that means that, God's going to support us in however it is we're feeling and wherever we are within that co-creatorship. So if that means that we truly don't believe in it, whether that's because there are still attachments or adaptations within us that prevent that, then that's what's going to be reflected to us from the universe. So we want to continue focusing on God loves us and God has our back. So let's take this further. That means that, I can be empowered or empowered others before I create or do something, because I'm supported not only by God's love, but when I talk about understanding how this universe works, that includes karmic law. And so a lot of us perceive things through the lens of win or lose. And so, through our karmic journey, we may feel like, after losing, right, or after heartbreak, because of those experiences, now, I need to be this completely good person, or, be nice, even at my expense, or, maybe try a conventional route because it's safer. And in actuality, you are being called to kind of understand through this journey where you want to reach an integration point, right? A balance. Okay. So I know who I am, and this particular experience is showing me contrast. I don't need to feel lesser than myself because of this. It's more of, how can I, adapt and, still keep parts of me, still embody source, but take what I've learned from this particular part of the human experience and integrate it so that, I understand now where I no longer prefer that particular aspect of the experience. But essentially, negative outcomes, again, are going to just come from a byproduct of the learning experience, right? Or where within our soul contracts, we're having these checkpoints to show us, where we might be challenged within that source embodiment of knowing that we're limitless and we're undefined and we're expansive. Okay. So, when we have this concept that God loves us and God has our back, even through those where we're processing and we're healing from them, we can always return back to that sense of who we are as a person and also who we are as an eternal soul and creator. Okay. And this is valuable because the experiences are going to keep experiencing. Okay. It's more about what it is that you want to take as mastery and leave behind as, the negative experience. And then the more challenging part is whenever it's subconscious, because then you have to, be presented something that triggers, where we need to return back to that larger truth of God's love and the support that's available. Because within source embodiment, get your ass. Because we're going to be on a continuous learning journey, but what we don't want to shift is our source embodiment, meaning how we perceive ourselves, how we fully lean into, being limitless, expansive, because that energy goes before us and creates before us. And, this is super important for the collective because a lot of what we put our energy to, the partnerships, that are bred, the connections that are made, from a place where we're outside of source embodiment, it makes it to where it confirms this cyclical aspect of who we are in these comfort zones that are developed from negative experiences versus what is the truth of who we are and what is available to us. And so, then we start living in that space of believing that we're less than what it is we would be more fulfilled with, and tolerating things that don't make us feel as great as we truly could. And that is preyed upon, by lower conscious beings and by others who are in their source embodiment that don't have as positive intentions or aren't aware, that won't do it for you. They won't be in your power for you, right? And so it can be difficult to continue that path of continuously staying detached, knowing that we are source, we're eternal and a creator. But when you have that connection to God and you can quickly tune into the remembrance outside of this human experience, then you're going to find an inner strength that comes from the power of source within you eternally. Knowing nothing is held back from us from where we're aware of how we've blocked it previously or prevented it previously, whether that's subconscious or conscious, right? Where we understand it's permissible spiritually and tangibly in our lives, and where we also see that permission within ourselves physically, right? Tangibly, meaning by way of a positive self-perception, esteem and self-worth, and without judgment of ourselves, knowing that because it's a learning experience, you get to adjust and adapt with the new information. And that's enough. That's enough for God, and that's enough for you. So when we speak karmically, you have darker traits for a reason. That reason is for competition, right? Because this is a conscious reality. Some may call it a game, and deeper times it doesn't feel like it. But, you have darker traits so that you can compete, if you will. Okay. And, this is why I always go back to it's your intentions and how you steward that karmic will. Okay. Not necessarily about having the darker traits, but how you use them. And in fact, now, I would argue it's how are you pushing the limits to compete? Okay. Does that mean competing at all costs? Not necessarily, but you have the self-trust within you from previous lived experiences and what you know spiritually to set the tone of bending reality based on believing that you could never lose. And again, that's because you are shifting the trajectory into your favor, not controlling it, but shifting it by way of remembering that eternality, remembering that creatorship and that co-creatorship, so that no matter what, you're always going towards that target of either the direct outcome you want or a transmuted version. And I talked about divine intervention before, by way of, not being dependent on divine intervention. But when you are in co-creatorship and your signal is so strong and you're moving towards, one of the two outcomes I mentioned, then source will come behind you and deliver that outcome, sometimes even against all odds. Okay. And it's our journey to practice being in that source embodiment so that we can confirm it for ourselves. And so this is why when we come into awareness of our creatorship and our eternality, things can drop into our reality almost instantly. But we have to be in a practice, in a knowing spiritually, energetically, and by way of our actions that this aligns for us. Because we live in a realm of attraction. So we want to get real skilled, real masterful at recognizing the difference between what is our multidimensional expression versus what we've created karmically. Okay. And that can get really, confusing here, but don't think because, for example, you're like cussing on the internet that that's what's creating an energy to, bring in drama into your life or chaos. Okay. So where we can typically feel unmotivated, reject bearing down on bending reality to our will is when things don't typically go our way. But the reality is you've created the momentum for that particular product and it's just a transmuted version. And sometimes when we get to that transmuted version, we feel like, oh, well, this isn't what I expected. And, it's entirely negative and we start to judge it. But the reality is this place is a place of endless releasing and receiving. So where you end up doesn't always have to be where you end up, meaning you can always co-create the next best outcome or, love yourself in whatever that experience is at that point in that moment in time. However, since it's a continuous learning journey, once we do process and we understand that, it doesn't define us, then we're able to move forward into something new. Okay. A big thing that I'm seeing and that I've experienced is we will, confuse our multidimensional expression, how we see ourselves or, how we've learned to see ourselves from, inherent, responses to fear or later experiences of fear. We take that and it dilutes our expression. But where I want to translate things is that our expression is forever, eternally source embodiment. So where we lean into, that limitlessness and that expansiveness and that boundlessness and where nothing outside of us can, shift that's the entirety of how your experience will conspire around you. Okay. And before awareness that, we are creators, a lot of us understand that from our different, lived experiences, but it becomes powerful spiritually when you know it at the level of source and soul, because now you have the wisdom of how the universe works and where you are as part of shaping it from things you've imagined to now a reality in the physical. And this measure of power, along with understanding your eternality will help you to ascend beyond societal, cultural, or religious belief structures that don't tell the whole picture of how vast you are as a soul and how you prefer and have become who you are as a person and what you want to create in this life and how you want to exist in it, okay? Because you as a soul goes beyond all of those things. This is where we want to keep the power, because now your decisions, or the decisions that you make that come from within you, are no longer dependent on the ideologies of anything outside of you. And when we're in a practice of this source embodiment, then everything comes behind us to confirm exactly that. But it doesn't happen before we allow that understanding. Bending reality happens after. And that's because you're literally creating the film of your life with every step, decision, action, thought, and emotion, okay? It's not a movie unless you're the main character acting it out. So this is a call to push the limits, all right, on how you respond to life and where it is that you defer your power or you choose based on severity and where you feel it's important to assert that source embodiment, okay? My intention with this video was to give y'all every permission at every level, okay? Because this is what moves mountains and creates whole new worlds, all right? And I'm not saying that just metaphorically, honey bun. I'm saying that because it's been confirmed in my reality. And, you know, through certain experiences that can be diluted, but nothing motivates me more than knowing that God loves me and God has my back. So I'm going to make sure that you guys know it as well. Okay. Anyway, I love y'all so much. Please like, share, and subscribe. Drop in the comments, you know, what really inspired and motivated you to bridge the connections and the gaps for where you're going to start bearing down on bending your reality. Okay. I love y'all so much. I don't have nothing else to say. Hold on. Anything. Now that's the end of the video. Okay. I'll see you on the next video.